You're miles from help. The wind cuts through your clothes. Your hands are going numb. And somewhere in the trees, something's watching. On the frontier, survival didn't depend on strength alone. It depended on the gear you carried. Out here, every tool had to earn its place. If it couldn't feed you, defend you, warm you, or keep you moving, it didn't belong. One forgotten item could mean freezing to death, starving in plain sight, or never making it back. Native tribes defending their homelands, infections from the smallest cuts, broken bones, miles from help. Any one of these could turn a journey into a death march. Let's take a look at the 7 essential survival tools that kept frontiersmen alive, starting with the most important of all, the knife. Out on the frontier, a man without a knife was as good as dead. The Norse had a saying, "A knifeless man is a lifeless man," and that was just as true in the American wilderness. Knives were a frontiersman's most important tool, used for cutting, skinning, gutting, carving, even defending yourself. If something needed doing, your knife did it. No two knives were alike. Every man carried the blade he trusted. Some bought theirs from traders. Others crafted them from worn-down files or farriers' rasps. Where it came from didn't matter. What mattered was that it worked. The Green River knife was a favorite. Simple, sharp, and perfect for butchering game. The Bowie knife, on the other hand, was long, heavy, and just as suited for fighting as it was for survival. Some carried dirks, slim, double-edged blades designed more for stabbing than carving. When men couldn't afford to buy one, they made one. A piece of scrap steel, a wooden handle, a few rivets. It didn't need to look good, it just had to be sharp. Explorer Warren Ferris described how valuable knives were, often traded with native groups alongside vermilion and tobacco. He even witnessed traders try to sneak away with whatever else they could grab. Trapper Osborne Russell painted a clear picture of what was essential in a survival kit. A horse, a few beaver traps, extra moccasins, powder, bullets, and a butcher knife strapped to the belt. Some assume all trappers use factory-made Green River knives from J. Russell and Company, but that's only partly true. The company didn't start stamping Green River works until 1837, just before the fur trade started to decline. Most mountain men used whatever blades they could find or make. James Clyman, an experienced trapper from the 1820s, nearly died over his. A man once ran up and waved Clyman's own butcher knife across his chest. Clyman, thinking it was a bluff, bared his chest. That hesitation might have saved his life. On the frontier, knives meant power. They were your last line of defense, your lifeline. Skinning knives had short, curved blades for stripping hides without tearing them. A good skinning knife saved time, preserved the pelt, and made you more valuable as a trapper. Many of the best were imported from Sheffield, England, and sold through Hudson's Bay traders. Later, by the 1830s, Green River Works also made them. In fact, the phrase "done up to Green River" became slang for a job done right. Knives weren't just tools, they were part of the man who carried them. Historian Carl P. Russell said it best. Like a gun, a mountain man's knife was deeply personal. On the frontier, a man without a firearm was already halfway in the ground. Just like knives, guns weren't optional. They were essential. Hunting, self-defense, and even trade depended on having a reliable weapon and knowing how to use it. As men pushed deeper into the wilderness, they needed something stronger than what ordinary settlers carried. That's where the Hawken rifle came in. Built by the Hawken brothers in St. Louis, it quickly became the go-to firearm for mountain men. Shorter and heavier than earlier rifles, it packed serious power, firing a .50 or .53 caliber round that could bring down a buffalo or stop a charging attacker with a single shot. But power wasn't everything. Sometimes versatility mattered more. That's where the Northwest trade gun stood out. It was a smoothbore musket, meaning it could fire both shot and ball. It wasn't as accurate as a rifle, but it was incredibly adaptable. Trappers, traders, and native warriors alike carried them. If a man could only afford one gun, this was a smart choice. There were also pistols, large single-shot horse pistols that served as weapons of last resort. They were heavy, slow to reload, and not the most reliable. But when you had nothing else, one well-placed shot could be a lifesaver. The 1830s brought a major change to firearms: percussion caps. These replaced flintlocks and made guns more dependable in wet conditions. But not everyone adopted them right away. Many stuck to what they knew, even if it meant risking a misfire in a storm. On the frontier, trust in your gear could matter more than innovation. And a gun wasn't enough on its own. You had to keep it ready. A powder horn, often made from bison horn, was used to keep black powder dry and safe. A powder measure ensured consistent loads, essential for accuracy and safety. A misload could cost you a hunt, or worse, a hand. Mountain men made their own bullets. Using lead, a ladle, and a bullet mold, they poured and shaped rounds over campfires. Buying ammo wasn't an option. They also carried leather bags full of lead balls. And for percussion guns, a small cap tin with the tiny metal charges needed to fire. Lose your caps and your rifle becomes dead weight. A frontiersman's rifle was more than a tool. It was his lifeline. It had to be clean, loaded, and within reach at all times. Because in the wild, you didn't always get a warning, and you definitely didn't get a second shot. Without fire, a frontiersman didn't stand a chance. It meant more than just warmth. It was safety, food, light, and sometimes the only thing keeping death at bay. Fire cooked what you hunted, dried soaked clothing, scared off predators, and sent signals for help when no one was close enough to hear you scream. Lose your fire-starting gear, and you weren't just cold, you were helpless. The most common method? Flint and steel. Strike a high-carbon steel against a shard of flint, and you'd get a shower of sparks. The goal was to land them on char cloth, a blackened strip of burned cotton or linen that caught a spark and smoldered long enough to light a flame. When that ran out, frontiersmen improvised. Dry grass, cedar bark, or amadou, a spongy fungus from trees, all worked in a pinch. The steel wasn't fancy, usually a repurposed tool, an old file, spring, or scrap metal. As long as it threw sparks, it was good enough. And if flint was scarce, they used chert, jasper, or agate instead. It wasn't about the name, it was about the spark. These tools had to stay bone dry. Men kept them in possible bags, tinder pouches or chuck mucks, decorative but practical tinder boxes, often passed down or traded. A few carried fire pistons, rare but powerful tools that sparked tinder using sudden air compression. Primitive, but effective. When even metal couldn't be found, frontiersmen turned to the oldest method known to man: friction. Bow drills, hand drills, fire plows, rubbing wood against wood, building heat, breath by breath, until an ember formed. Making fire in wind or snow wasn't just about technique, it was a test, and only the ones who passed lived to see another morning. On the frontier, everything a man needed had to fit on his back or saddle. No backpacks, no extra weight, just leather, canvas, and clever packing. The most important? The possible bag. Worn across the chest, it held the gear a frontiersman might possibly need at any moment. Powder measure, flint and steel, bullets, a knife, even dried meat. It was a toolbox, first aid kit, and survival stash in one. Next came the bullet pouch, kept close to the body, usually under the arm. Fast reloads meant survival in a gunfight, so bullets, patches, and flints had to be right there. Then there was the market wallet, a simple linen or canvas sack with openings at both ends. No buttons or buckles. It carried flour, dried meat, and trade goods. Easy to fold, sling, or tie to a saddle. For longer trips, men carried a haversack, a cross-body bag borrowed from military use. It held food, a tin cup, even a small kettle. Think of it as a mobile pantry. And for small essentials, the ditty bag, sewing needles, sinew, fishing line, spare flint. This kept you functional when gear broke, and it always did. On the trail, organization meant survival. Every pouch had a purpose. Nothing was carried without reason. Out in the wild, cooking wasn't about flavor or presentation. It was about staying alive. Food gives you the energy to keep moving, keep hunting, keep surviving. And to make it edible, you needed the right tools. Simple, sturdy, and reliable. At the center of almost every campfire meal was the cast-iron Dutch oven. It was heavy, sure, but nearly indestructible. You could bake, boil, stew, or fry with it. Just bury it in the coals, pile embers on the lid, and let the heat do the work. One pot, countless meals. For baking, some carried a reflector oven, a foldable tin box designed to reflect campfire heat back onto dough. It was perfect for making biscuits, cornbread, or pies without needing a stone hearth. Lightweight, portable, and surprisingly effective. Then came the spider skillet, a three-legged cast-iron pan built to sit directly in the fire. No need for balancing logs or makeshift grates. It was steady, stable, and ideal for frying meat or flipping corn cakes. To eat on the move, frontiersmen used porringers, small-handled bowls made of wood, pewter, or clay. They were part of the cook set and worked just as well for soup, mush, or leftover stew. For stretching rations or salvaging stale bread, toasting forks came in handy. These long-handled tools let men roast small bits of meat or crisp up food over the flames without burning their hands. And while it may sound fancy, some men even packed wooden whisks, simple utensils for stirring stews or mixing up batter from flour and water. These weren't luxury items. They were essentials, because in the wilderness, even a hot meal could mean the difference between pushing forward or falling behind. Out on the frontier, going without water wasn't an inconvenience, it was a death sentence. Streams and creeks weren't always nearby, and even when they were, they came with risks of their own. A single sip from the wrong place could lead to parasites, infection, or worse. Dysentery and cholera took down just as many men as bullets did. That's why frontiersmen always carried water, no exceptions. The most basic solution was the water skin, tough animal hide sewn tightly and sealed with pitch or wax to prevent leaking. Goat or sheep hide worked best. It was flexible, durable, and kept water relatively cool. The downside? It made every gulp taste like you were chewing on a boot. But taste didn't matter. Staying hydrated did. Some preferred wooden canteens, carved from hardwood and bound with hoops like miniature barrels. They were sturdier than water skins, but they had a weakness. If they dried out, the seams could shrink and crack, turning the whole thing useless. Smart frontiersmen kept them full at all times just to keep the wood swollen and sealed. Then there were gourds, nature's own solution. Hollowed, dried, and sometimes reinforced with rawhide. They were lightweight, easy to carry, and surprisingly good at preserving freshness. But one drop on a rock and you'd be drinking from your hands. By the mid-1800s, tin canteens became popular. They were mass-produced, relatively light, and often wrapped in cloth to keep the metal from heating up in the sun. But they had their own issues. Tin rusted, and water stored too long in a rusty container tasted foul and sometimes made you sick. Those who had time or the firewood boiled their water. Many didn't. Whether out of urgency, laziness, or ignorance, plenty of men drank straight from streams, and many didn't live to regret it. For larger groups or longer journeys, there were barrel canteens, small wooden kegs strapped to wagons or pack animals. Heavier, yes, but they held more and were vital when crossing dry country. Native tribes had their own ingenious ways of carrying water. Some wove baskets and sealed them with pine resin. Others used birch bark, animal bladders, or even stomachs as containers. Their methods were often lighter, faster to make, and more sustainable. Many frontiersmen picked up these techniques along the way. At the end of the day, it didn't matter what your canteen was made of, hide, tin, gourd, or bark. What mattered was that it worked. Because if it didn't, you weren't going to last long. Some of the most life-saving tools on the frontier didn't look like much. They weren't flashy, they didn't make headlines, but without them, even the toughest frontiersman could be left helpless. First, there was the blade beyond the knife. Tomahawks, hatchets, and axes. These were everyday tools that doubled as deadly weapons. A tomahawk could split wood, take down saplings, or defend you in close combat. A full-sized axe could drop a tree or crack through bone for marrow. Most men carried one, many carried both, but even the best blade was useless if dull. That's why sharpening tools were essential. Some carried metal files strapped to their gear, Others used whetstones tucked into their pouches. Without a sharp edge, you couldn't hunt, build, butcher, or defend yourself. Then came the unexpected items, the ones that didn't look like survival gear. A silk scarf, for example. Lightweight and versatile, it blocked sun, filtered dust, and protected against wind. Wrap it wet around your neck to stay cool. Use it as a bandage, sling, or emergency pouch. It was simple but incredibly effective. Spare fabric, like red flannel, was another must-have. It provided insulation, made a quick blanket, padded shoes, or even served as a trade item. In freezing conditions, layering it under a coat could be the difference between frostbite and survival. Then there were Hudson's Bay blankets, thick, heavy-duty wool blankets that held heat even when wet. The points stitched into the edge showed size and weight, helping buyers choose the right one for their needs. Trappers traded furs for them because they knew the value. In the dead of winter, a good blanket could literally save your life. Lastly, there was canvas. Plain, rugged, and waterproof, it was the multi-tool of frontier fabrics. It became tents, ground covers, makeshift packs and tarps. It patched broken gear. It covered food. It shielded men from storms. Everything a frontiersman carried had a reason. No extras, no dead weight. Because when your days from help and the wild is closing in, the gear you carry isn't just equipment, it's your future. The right tools kept a frontiersman alive. But even with every tool at hand, survival still came down to one thing: the hunt. In our next video, discover the hunting methods that fed pioneers, trappers, and scouts without modern weapons or gear.